Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
We begin with one of the most unusual and lengthy criminal court battles you may ever hear about. It all started in Iraq in 2007 with U.S. contractors accused of killing innocent civilians in the heat of war. One of the accused, a decorated former U.S. soldier, was on trial just this past week for a second time 11 years after the incident. In all, the lives of 4 decorated former U.S. soldiers still hang in the balance after all this time. Did they act in legitimate self-defense, or are they criminals? And did our own government suppress and misrepresent evidence? Today's cover story is the lingering case of Raven 23.
Target!
The logical place to begin is in Iraq. At the time, one of the most dangerous places on the planet. After the 9/11 attacks, U.S. forces deposed dictator Saddam Hussein, then faced a constant barrage from Islamic extremist terrorists and insurgents.
It was one of the worst killings of innocent civilians by U.S. contractors in Iraq.
On September 16, 2007, there was a deadly clash in the capital of Baghdad. A team of former U.S. military troops, codenamed Raven 23, were working for the private firm Blackwater when they reportedly opened fire on innocent civilians,
killing more than a dozen.
The episode heightened tensions between Iraq and the U.S., and the FBI stepped in to investigate. It concluded the Blackwater contractors unleashed powerful sniper fire, machine guns, and grenade launchers on innocent men, women, and children, shooting at least 14 without cause, including 2 boys ages 9 and 11. But like most stories, there are at least 2 sides. Eric Prince was Blackwater's founder.
It's the story of American military veterans who answered the call again when their country needed them, this time to protect diplomats in a very large scale in a war zone. And it is their political prosecution that followed a unfortunate incident in the middle of a war zone after multiple enemy attacks.
Back to Whistleblower Wednesday, folks. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, the saga of Raven 23 is and I quote, I'm going to read a quote here from the book, shocking story of how the U.S. government framed 4 decorated veterans working as Blackwater military contractors in Iraq with phony war crimes to placate foreign autocrats. In Raven 23, journalist Gina Keating reveals how 4 American citizens working as personal security contractors for U.S. diplomats in the world's most dangerous city were convicted of war crimes in a federal trial that made international headlines and was plagued with prosecutor and judicial misconduct. The men spent 6 years in federal prison while Ms. Keating, the men's families, and a dedicated and growing group of supporters, including U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, petitioned Donald Trump for their release and obtained 4 full and unconditional pardons in 2020, close quote. Well, Paul Slough is a decorated combat soldier with deployments in Bosnia and Iraq. Before becoming a contractor for Blackwater, he was one of the 4 Blackwater guards charged in the 2007 killing of 17 Iraqi civilians. Paul was pardoned by President Trump and is currently district director for Texas House State Representative Jared Patterson, co-founder of 3 Ravens business strategies and a veterans advocate, like many of us are after our service. Paul, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Colonel Maness, thank you for having me.
Hey, sir, we appreciate your time. But this is a very important story that has to be told more often now, that especially now that we know what we know about what happens in the Department of Justice and the FBI, in our own intelligence agencies like the CIA, our allied intelligence agencies like MI6. They have all shown to be opposed to average American citizens.
Yeah, I agree with that somewhat. And to your point, we are in a kind of a pivotal point in our national history wherein a lot of those layers are being pulled back. You
Hmm.
take the kind of our current FBI director, Kash Patel, and his insight and what he
Yeah.
brings to the FBI, and even the new U.S. pardon attorney, Ed Martin,
Hmm.
what he's doing in his capacity. And so we're starting to see more and more of the layers being pulled back, the truth being told, and it seems like our story is perfectly positioned to be right in line with all of that.
Yeah, exactly right. And I will remind our viewers, the book Raven 23. Go to Amazon and find it and click that link, because the guys in the book get something from those link clicks. And you know what? They've had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, I'm sure, to defend themselves, plus the income loss during 6 years in prison, and those kind of things. So, but the book is very important to understand this story, isn't it? Isn't it, Paul? Tell
It
folks
is, because
a
it
little
it
bit.
not only walks through the incident, but it really brings into to scope what it was we were faced against. So,
Hmm.
for instance, the police chief that you showed on your reel on the lead up to this, his name
Hmm.
is Colonel Kareem Ferris, and he was brought to the United States court to come and testify against us. But lo and behold, our defense attorneys found out that the night before, uh, some intel agency or somebody waved a red flag and said this guy's tied to two different terrorist organizations. He cannot testify in an American court, and they flew him out that night. Um, and to give it greater context, the entire scope of the investigation from the FBI that we found out during our tank investigation, they
Hmm.
took the entire investigation from that police chief. And so they based everything that they had on that investigation by the police chief that had been tied to those terrorist organizations. And so that was the entire predicate of the case. And NACDL made it right when they gave an amicus brief for our appellate argument that said this case should have never been brought in an American court.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It should have never been brought. The Tell folks how you got to the point where you became a Blackwater contractor and found yourself back in Iraq under that condition.
Honestly, I was at a point where I'd just come back from deployment and felt like the mission just was not complete yet. And obviously that was around 2005, 2006.
Hmm.
Went to a job fair. There was a company there named Blackwater. I'd heard of them, didn't know a lot about them, but we walked through my background, walked through different tasking orders that I'd done, and it seemed to the recruiter that I was a good fit. So I submitted my application. You go through the process. You get to Moyoc, go through about, I think it's 4 weeks of vetting and then a little bit of training. But
Hmm.
ultimately, they just want to see where you are, what your capabilities are, and see if you're a good fit. I think we started with roughly 40 guys. We ended with 10 or 11, maybe. My numbers may be off there, but it was somewhere around that. And then once your background cleared, you got your TSSCI, you launched pretty quick to either Afghanistan or Iraq. I had not been to Afghanistan, so they thought obviously I would be a better fit for Iraq.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is this is not just a bunch of ex-Army and Marine Corps folks that have left their enlistments that don't know what they're doing. It sounds like by the selection process and the screening process, uh, that you guys go from 40 or so down to 10, and that's not even counting phone screening, interview screening, and those kind of things. And the team has selected some really high performing individuals that understand close combat. Is that right?
That was my experience. They also pulled together guys from the SEALs, from DevGru, from CAG. I mean, you name it. Any special operator that had been there, done that was part of their portfolio. And I think for me, that was the most impressive piece. Is they brought together all these skill sets and homogenized them into a functional unit that served to protect the U.S. ambassador all the way to USAID officials. And in my mind, Eric Prince put together an incredible company, an incredible model, and the results were such that we never once lost a principal. We lost 43 guys, but again, we never lost a principal, and so that's something that we all carry with us.
Yeah, it's an impressive. It really is an impressive record. On the situation that developed that day, the next segment, we'll talk a little bit more detail about what, from your perspective, about what happened. But when you were tasked, your team was tasked to protect the principal, in this case, diplomats in Baghdad, I assume in Baghdad, which is at the time the most dangerous place in the world, really. I mean, you can't get any more dangerous than that with what was going on then. Your job is to protect that principal at all costs so that they live, right?
Period. In a story, that principal comes home.
Yeah, and the training is all oriented towards that. And and your team. I looked at your background. It looks like you had a lot of background in security for convoys moving through areas like this. You understood the intelligence reports and those kind of things.
Sure. And then with that, of course, personal principal protection, whether it was our battalion commander or brigade commander.
Mm-hmm. Were you satisfied with the level of support from a logistics, intel, commo, all of those aspects that you need to have, working as close to 100% in that environment as possible?
I'll tell you, I was blown away every day at the rate with which, number one, we weren't only flexible enough to match the enemy's TTPs, but to your point, we had that support at every turn, from food to laundry service to radios to communications back home. It was an absolute full-throated operation that, in my mind, is going to be hard to replicate.
Yeah, at a distance, that's what my impression of it was. I met Eric a couple of times and had real short conversations with him. The guy's just very impressive. You can tell he knew he knows what he's doing.
And he specifically puts people in charge, like all good leaders do, that are, number one, fit for that role, but number two, have the warfighter in mind. And granted, we weren't an offensive force by any stretch,
right.
But we all had that same mindset of, we're going home and the principal's going home. And the principal always came first.
One more question before we go to the commercial break, Paul, and that is, there's a lot of, I don't know what to call it, conflict around the name Blackwater. The four guys were burned and lynched from a bridge earlier. Did all that have an impact on what happened after you guys defended yourselves?
It was interesting. It seemed like anything that went wrong within the theater automatically got blamed on Blackwater for whatever reason. And I'm not sure if it was because we were most prolific, we were the most successful. I'm not really sure, but Eric Prince pointed out multiple times that he was approached at a war college speech, and there were generals that were coming to him and saying that no matter what, our guys always put your call signs on their dashboards of their Humvees because they know that no matter what, Blackwater's coming to help. Period. End of story.
Exactly. So thank you for helping me set the stage for the reality, which you had a highly competent team surrounded and cocooned in a highly competent both screening, training, and planning and execution and logistics operation led by actual leaders that know what's going on, who put real leaders that understood what was happening in charge of these operations. That's the setting, folks, that we get to. In the next segment, we're going to show a clip of some details of what happened that day. And Paul's going to talk us through what the facts were. We'll be right back.
A former Navy SEAL made Blackwater an integral part of U.S. overseas security after Islamic extremist terrorists bombed the USS Cole in 2000, murdering 17 sailors. Blackwater was hired to train our sailors in counterterrorism. In 2004, Iraqi insurgents killed 4 Blackwater contractors, set their bodies on fire, dragged them through the streets, and hung them from a bridge. In 2007, Blackwater's Raven 23 team was working for the U.S. State Department when a car bomb exploded. They were called to move a U.S. diplomat out of the danger zone to safety.
What was the claim from the other side? What did they say that your guys had done wrong?
They claimed that it was a bad firing, that there was all these innocent civilians that were killed.
In fact, to this day, media accounts make it sound as if the Blackwater Guards randomly opened fire on Iraqi civilians, unprovoked and for no reason.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. And we're talking with one of the members of that convoy, Paul Slop, who is here with us today about the book, Raven 2-3, that's come out. You just can't, you need to go get this book and read it, folks, because you can't get the reality from video clips. So you have to look in every direction to find factual information. As good as that interview is that we're showing clips from, and it's fantastic. The book really will lay it all out for you. And Paul, so give the folks a taste of the detail that's in the book about the incident itself that maybe gets wiped over in videos and those kind of things.
Yeah, I think one of the things that gets glossed over, as you alluded to earlier, is in Baghdad itself, there were on average about 180 attacks a day in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And so this one little gunfight, and I say little gunfight because in the broader context of everything, it didn't even register for us as something to worry about. And I say that with the context of sitting in the chow hall. You hear explosions go off, but this one was much closer. It came over our radios. We were, I believe, tertiary that day on the TST teams, which were a QRF, quick reaction force. So we responded. We ran to the trucks, obviously, and we staged our vehicles, pulled out of the parking lot, got to the checkpoint, paused there for a bit, and then we launched out of checkpoint 12 right there to Nasur Square. So you button hook right outside of that gate, and you're in the square. It was our understanding that we were locking down the square to ensure that there was a clear egress route for the low pro team that was coming back with the principal. We understood that there was a car bomb that had gone off, followed on by a small arms fire, which was a TTP of the enemies. They got the principal out. Another TST team responded on site to the principal's location. They were bringing them out through what we understood was our location. But as soon as we pulled into the square, a white Kia jumped out of traffic It was my thought that that's the car bomb. Here comes the follow-on attack to the first responders. That was us in this case. I engaged the driver, and then immediately it was an ambush that I feel that we had received that was meant for that team coming through. At the time, obviously, you're just responding to what's in front of you, but hindsight being what it is, it was a small ambush. So it was set up for low-pro vehicles to come through and no doubt try to turn that scene into what you just showed for our four brothers that went down in 2004.
Yeah, so you engaged the car driver, and what I'm hearing you saying is there's another small force that's hidden around this square that opened fire on your team.
Correct. Multiple directions. The Bearcat that I was in was rendered unusable. Tires were blown out. So we had taken small arms fire from multiple areas, and even in our in the main trial in 2014, one of the gunners that was on a little bird that was above us had testified to men taking off IP uniforms, wrapping up their AK-47s, and throwing them in the back of a bongo truck, which oddly enough caused the prosecutor to chip a tooth. And he had asked the gunner why he hadn't said anything in the grand jury testimony, and he responded frankly. He said, "You never asked me." And so that was a critical piece of evidence that just really seemed to get glossed over. That, the news report were such that we rolled into the square, we just opened fire on innocent people going about their day, when in fact it was a two-way gunfight.
Oh, absolutely. Based on what I've seen and read, it was definitely a two-way gunfight. So, and we'll cover this in the next segment a little bit deeper, I'm sure. But so after the incident, what was your team's actions? Just standard operating procedure and recover back to the Ford operating base where you were located at originally?
Right. So we went through our recovery procedures, got my vehicle towed back to our parking lot. As soon as we got there, the lead mechanic started looking at everything, said, "Yeah, we've got bullet holes here, there." Our team DDM pulled me out of the turret, stripped my gear off, obviously looking for holes. When your adrenaline is pumping that hard, sometimes people can take shrapnel or even a round and not realize it. So he was looking over me and making sure that I was okay. And we were in the event of trying to transfer all of our stuff over to another vehicle in the event of a follow-on attack.
And was there a follow-on attack?
There was not for us, no, sir.
Yeah. And the folks that you were protecting, that principal was safely gotten to where they needed to go to put on with their
Yes,
mission?
sir. They got her back into the IZ ahead of us. We actually came in behind them.
Okay. Yeah. So in the immediate reset, anybody come to you and say, "Hey, you guys really screwed this up," or?
No, there was some concern about our shift lead at the time. He had, as I understood it, received a cell phone call from the TOC that told him to stand down and to wait. But none of us got that message. We were all on the same radio freaks, but obviously we weren't in on the cell phone conversation. And so the leadership from BW came and pulled him aside, and it's really fuzzy at that point exactly how all that shook out. But at any rate, that evening or that afternoon, we all went to DOS and gave our statements, and it really just kind of went normal protocol from there. And then Department of State, of course, did their investigation and went and looked, interviewed us, who were shooters on the team that day. And from our understanding at the time, we were cleared by the Department of State agents of any wrongdoing.
So how did the sequence of events go when your team found out that there was going to be massive uproar over this?
Well, that was on CNN. I think it was the same evening we were in the chow hall We had all just come back from the embassy, and we were sitting in the chow hall, and there were reports on CNN about, about there being some type of mass shooting that had occurred in Baghdad, and it was a one-sided gunfight. And immediately, obviously, I emailed my wife, tell her, hey, everything's okay. This was our team, but we're all right. The principal's good. And for my mind, it was a successful mission because A, the principal made it home, and B, none of our guys died. So for me, it was a successful mission.
Yeah, that's the way I think I would have been thinking about it too. After the CNN hit, did you guys get calls, or was that basically in the leadership level? Those kind of things.
Yeah, it would have been the leadership level. Again, there were a couple of follow-up interviews because there were discrepancies in round counts. All of us the majority of us that engaged our weapon systems admitted to it in our sworn statements. But looking back now, there were some that didn't. And so that there were questions about round counts and discrepancies, which was really being hit hard from the Department of State side. And I understand why. But it was confusing to me of why they kept asking the same questions when it was the same answers.
That usually means they're onto something. They think they're onto something. I having run law enforcement operations a couple of times now. The other question I had that just popped out at me as I was thinking about this incident, reviewing what I knew about it, and skimming the book, those kind of things, is how do I put it? How did you how did the police chief connect with American forces and American authorities, I guess, to get away with this mischaracterization and the lies that were obviously told about the facts?
My understanding is he worked directly with Colonel Baslego, who was his American counterpart training their police department. And one of the things that was really being protected is that there was no infiltration of the Iraqi police department by AQIZ or any other forces. And so there was an immediate, almost reflexive response of, nope, this is all a one-way shoot. None of our guys were involved. It could not have been any of our IP forces involved in this gunfight or civilians. And come to find out, I forget how many guys that were KIA were actually tied to terrorist organizations. I think it was AQIZ and Jaish al-Mahdi.
So let me make sure I understood that. The narrative, the political narrative that was being closely protected was that there was no infiltration of Iraqi police forces or armed forces by any of the Al Qaeda in Iraq guys or any of the other terrorist groups or organizations. Is that correct?
Right. When you could buy uniforms on the street. I mean, it was that accessible.
And so the KIA guys from that target area where you guys engaged them, let me make sure I understood this correctly. Some of those folks were found to have infiltrated Iraqi forces somehow, or police forces, and were actually AQ guys, or did I understand that right?
So my understanding is, yes, some of the KIAs from that area were later found out to have been on a terrorist watch list and part of the infiltration units. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. And I think that's probably the beginning of the political, I don't know if you call it a cover up or not, Paul. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, you've got the United States at the time, along with Iran, who wanted to keep Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki in office. That was the goal, no matter what. And so in order to look strong, during his presidential campaign. They needed somebody to hang on the hook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we got to take another break. When we come back, we'll see another clip, and it's titled "Just a Typical Attack." And I want to get Paul to walk us through if there is anything unusual, and then how this became a court case for war crimes for American veterans that were doing their job, following their rules of engagement. We'll be right back with Paul Slopp here at Worldview Tube on the Rob Maness Show.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
Reason. But Prince says that sorely lacks context. The Raven 23 team thought it had come under ambush, trying to escort the U.S. official to safety.
The car bomb had gone off, and the support team, Raven 23, was to block the traffic circle so the fleeing vehicles could move through there smoothly. All the vehicles stopped, except for one, which kept coming and coming and coming. It was a white Kia.
The Blackwater team reported the white Kia was driving straight at the convoy like a suicide bomber. When it kept going, despite verbal orders and hand signals to stop, at least one Blackwater guard fired, killing the driver and his mother. Iraqis began firing back, and a full-blown firefight broke out.
Call for them as backup.
Reba and Daryl Slatton are the parents of one of the Blackwater guards, Nick Slatton.
So your understanding is that car to them was seen as a threat, somebody
Yes.
that maybe a car bomb.
Exactly. Car bomb. That's what it was. Stop, stop, stop. Keeps coming.
They had been actually briefed that morning on being on the lookout for a white Kia because it's probably a car bomb.
Iraqi investigators and the FBI said panic and animosity toward the locals drove some members of Raven 23 to commit a criminal massacre.
When you heard this report, did it ever occur to you that these men would end up being criminally prosecuted?
When I first heard the report of the events of September 16, it actually sounded like dozens and dozens of other incidents that the guys had been in and subject to in Iraq in war zones. Remember, helicopters were shot down, vehicles blown up, men shot by snipers, by suicide vests, by every kind of danger you could face. 41 of our men had been killed in action doing that work for the U.S. government, and hundreds.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking about the story, the saga, really, of Raven 23, the team that Eric Prince and Miss Atkinson of Full Measure are talking about in their interview clips that we've used throughout the show, and we want to make sure that we give them full credit for that. It's a fantastic program. You should go follow her and sign up to see that show, Full Measure, because it airs critically important information. And my guest today is one of those team members from Raven 23, Paul Slopp, who is part of the book that's out, and it's on Amazon, folks. Please go buy it, read that book, get the actual details of this story. And Paul, one of the things that jumped out at me in that clip, and the reason I chose it, was that Miss Atkinson reported in the clip that she had seen the reporting that said you guys had angst with the locals and you panicked. Based on what I know and have heard directly from you now, that doesn't appear to be the case. Where would that have come from?
Well, so that was, I guess, kind of part of that media narrative, and it bled through all the way through our entire trial. So that was actually one of the prongs of the prosecutor's case. And remember, when Judge Urbina tossed out our case in 2009, he did so without prejudice. And regrettably, I wish he would have done it with prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
But before he dropped that case, they actually dropped charges on Nicholas Slatton due to lack of evidence for manslaughter.
Okay.
Now, fast forward when they brought the superseding indictment in 2012, they came to Nick and said, we're going to charge you with murder unless you allow us to charge you with manslaughter, because the statute of limitations had run out and the Court of Appeals had already ruled they couldn't charge him. They, being the DOJ, could not charge Nick with manslaughter. And so they charged Nick with first-degree premeditated murder in a war zone after having dropped charges on him due to lack of evidence in 2009. And so that was their entire MO going forward, was one, proving somehow that we had this just blatant animosity against Iraqis writ large, regardless of who they were, who they belonged to, no discretion whatsoever. And they painted Nick in that way because they had to prove somehow that Nick had taken that immediate shot on that white Kia, even though their own FBI forensics analyst said there was no physical way he could have made that shot. So it's a long-winded answer, but ultimately that was the prosecutor's argument the entire time, and it was inserted into the media from the get-go because they had no evidence. My lawyer, Brian Heberlig, asked the forensics analyst from Quantico from the FBI specifically how many rounds or round shavings matched any of our weapon systems, us being the defendants, that were found in any civilian body, any vehicle, or the scene itself. And the FBI responded with none. There were none.
Wow. So that explains why part of the title of the book talks about DOJ and the prosecutorial misconduct, DOJ corruption, and those kind of things. Can you just like talk us through how I mean, so you guys you get charged and are brought home from Iraq, or you finish your tour, come home, and then they show up at your doorstep with an indictment?
So
How
as
does
it
that work?
happened, I was getting ready to go on leave, which we did. And at that time, we had 3 months on, 1 month off.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came home in October for my regular leave. We understood that the FBI had done an investigation 3 weeks after the fact on an unsecured site. I get home. I get a target letter through my attorney at the time, which was Bill Cofield, who later represented another defendant. I got a different attorney. Just the way it shook out. It wasn't any independent decision. It just the way it shook out with all of us getting assigned different attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
Bill calls me, says, hey, this target letter's coming, which we'd already kind of been talking through things. And then I think it was either the same day or the next day, my entire statement that I had given to the Department of State had been released on ABC News, and chunks of Dustin's sworn statement. Now, to put this in context, our statements that we gave to the State Department is equivalent to what a police officer writes out after a shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an immunized statement that cannot be used against you in a court of law.
Right.
And so these statements being released into the public realm, you can understand that would create just complete chaos in terms of sequestering a jury and keeping people tainted from evidence or from any type of story going forward.
Oh yeah. Well, so did was it ever discovered who leaked that information? What entity leaked it, or the person?
We have guesses and speculation, but we don't have anything to support it.
And where were you charged and tried at, your team? Were they in different locations or all together at the same location?
So in order to get ahead of a DC venue, we went and surrendered in Utah, in Senator Orrin Hatch's district, which was the home district of one of my co-defendants, Donald Ball. the choice was for us either Texas, Tennessee, New Hampshire, or Utah. And the attorneys came together and said Utah is
You'll
probably our
have to
best
pardon
suit.
that.
I'm sorry.
Stand by.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're back with Paul Slav, Raven 2-3 in the new book that's out. Raven 2-3 is the name of that book. And Paul, I apologize for that. We had some technical issues, which happens on live television podcast. So we were talking about the misinformation that was put out by somebody about using your statements that were not supposed to be released to the public, that are not supposed to be able to be held against you. And you were about to tell us how it led up that you were charged with actual crimes in a U.S. court. And the venue you had talked about you chose was Utah instead of getting caught up in the D.C. court. And thankfully, you guys had some attorneys thinking about that and did the right thing, I think.
Yeah, so we did go and surrender in Utah. And then from that point, we, as I understand it, requested the Castigar hearing, which would be heard in the D.C. court by Judge Ricardo M. Urbina. We got our 3-week Castigar hearing, which, as I understand it in the legal world, is really, really rare. And what that means in plain English is a Castigar hearing is walking through evidence that could have been tainted. And so they had to walk through each piece of evidence to figure out if it had been tainted or not. And come to find out, Ken Cole, who was the prosecutor at the time, had not only read our statements, but also used them in developing their indictment. And Judge Urbina came out with that 100-page, essentially excoriation of his misuse of our statements and misuse of applying the law correctly in our case, and dismissed the case due to constitutional violations and the fact that we had been cleared by Department of State officials.
Yeah, but when he dismissed the case, it wasn't with prejudice. And when it's not with prejudice, then they can come back and charge you again. But
that's
if
right.
If the evidence was tainted, what evidence did they try to use this time?
They re-engineered the case, and so essentially they just brought in Nick as he's the one that kicked off the entire manslaughter event through his murderous shot from his sniper rifle. And so that was a new case that was brought in 2012, which would have been President Obama's primary year, I believe, with new prosecutors. Ken Cole at the time had been, I think, helping. Yeah, I don't want to misspeak here, but he was not in the picture at that time. Anthony Asuncion, who was a U.S. attorney, along with AUSA Patrick Martin, were the ones that brought the case.
So you eventually went to trial?
We did. So in June of 2014, my family and I, along with the other fellows, moved to D.C. We showed up for our trial. Showed up for that trial. We were all living in the same home, except for Evan. He had chosen an apartment downtown, which just suited his lifestyle much better.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing is I went downtown for a housekeeping hearing, and I'm sitting at the table with my attorneys, and I'm the only defendant there. And Patrick Martin, of all people, walks up. Now here, picture this. This is the assistant U.S. attorney who walks up, reaches out his hand to shake my hand, and he says, "Who is this fine-looking young man?" Ahead of a trial. And I stand up, I shake his hand, and I said, "My name's Paul Slough, and I'm one of the 4 men you're trying to kill." And the guy was just gobsmacked. And I think I was equally gobsmacked at the fact that they didn't even know what I looked like. They had no clue who I was. I was simply part of that machine.
Speaking of the machine, Paul, tell folks that what's in the book about this machine that really attacked you guys, and based on what I've heard, totally unwarranted. I mean, the reason I played the third clip was that was Eric talking about this is a typical day, a typical type of attack. Hundreds of them are happening every single day in the city and around the country. It wasn't unusual. Nothing stood out about it. Why did this machine this machine able to attack you guys like?
Well, one of the pieces that Gina found out through her investigation was that the news bureau at the time they're in Baghdad, I can't recall correctly, but it had something to do with guidance that they had received from the U.S. bureau to cover this story. And it was my understanding that, based on what Cheryl Atkinson was reporting, and even CNN the same night putting out their reports, was purely in the context that this was a completely one-sided gunfight.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I go back to the 3 entities that were involved in this decision-making process. 2 were government, and 1 was an oil company. And so, looking at the entirety of the context, you have people who want a particular man in charge and willing to do what's necessary to make that happen. And I'll put a finer point on it in that the same week that this gunfight happened, the same police chief that was removed from our country because he couldn't testify in our courts being tied to terrorist organizations, he put out essentially what was, if you were in Nasir Square on September 16th, come to my office. Why? Because they were writing checks. They were writing checks for people that had been hurt, that had been killed. And so the numbers just exploded from that point. One of the guys that I worked with, who actually took the footage from the tower right after the gunfight, there are no bodies in the streets. There are no bodies strewn about that would have had to have been there based on the numbers and the counts that we were charged with. And so nothing ever made sense. And one last point, we were covered by a drone that none of us knew about that was in the air. It shows us coming into the square, and then it goes black. And then there's a wet spot where my command vehicle was that got shot out from under us. And then it's it. And the prosecutors said that it was our fault because we didn't file to preserve that evidence that we didn't know existed.
Of course,
Right.
They always try to blame Brady violations on the defendants.
When the judge was awake and he wasn't getting woken up by marshals to answer questions.
Wow. Unfortunately, that's the government we lived in up until a few months ago. And I'm glad you brought up Cash and Pam Bondi and Ed Martin, because that team, they need more help though, Mr. President. Get more people like them to work, and Harmeet Dillon too is another one.
I put in. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm gonna play a little clip from one of your guys, I think, that got pardoned here. Go ahead, Mr. Producer, play that last clip.
And I remember I boxed in the word Fowler Snare, and then immediately I hear on the speaker, there's like a little speaker in your cell where you can push a panic button, you know, something happens. I hear over that, Slatton, pack your stuff, you got a presidential pardon. And this was a year and a half before the pardon even happened. There had been no mentions of pardons. It wasn't on any of our radar, none of that. And so I was like, man, I'm going crazy, right? And so it was a couple days later, they let us out of our cells finally to call our family. I called my sister and she's like, Nick, have you talked to anybody? I said, no, I've been locked down. She said, well, the New York Times reported that President Trump is considering pardoning soldiers accused of war crimes. And it mentioned you by name. I was in the paper with Golston and Gallagher and myself. Those were the three names in the article that was written. And I was like, that's the same day I heard the voice that I was praying.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. My guest today is Paul Slop, who is a team member of Raven 2-3 and telling the story that's in the book now. And the book is out. You can get it please go get it at Amazon and help these guys out by getting the story read and all the facts out there. Paul, how was your experience with the pardon? So you guys weren't aware there was a pardon even being asked for you. Is that right?
So I was, in that my wife and I had actually walked through that scenario in a prison waiting room or visitation room. She was determined, number one, to get a pardon, but there's not really a playbook of how to do that, right? There's not there's not attorneys out there that advertise that. And so she and one of our great friends, Ed Butowski here in Plano, Texas, got together, put their heads together, and she contacted and contracted with Dave Harrison and Eric Yasso out of Harrison Spiro. Now, Dave is a Democrat. We're Republicans. But at the end of the day, Dave, like Gina and many other Democrats, are Americans first. And so Dave jumped in both feet, said, let's figure out a strategy. Let's put this together, cap the cost for Kristen, because we're not people of means in that context. And so she and Dave agreed to a contract and an agreement and went forward. And at every turn, Dave did absolutely everything he could, leveraged every contact, developed a relationship with the now Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. And together they worked to get this case in front of the president. As it happened, Dave stopped sending bills. He just stopped sending bills because he believed in the case and he believed in right over might. And so the entire time, Chris and I are obviously talking back and forth. There were a couple times where Dave got a call into prison to me. So I knew that there was something in the works. Now, this was during COVID, and we were on lockdown a lot. But a friend of mine had a cell phone. He allowed me to use it. And I created a fake Facebook page so that way I could connect with her through instant messenger. And December 11th, I had a call with her and she said, it's happening. It's guaranteed. The pardon is coming. She asked about the timeline. They said about 7 days. Well, of course, we're excited. Tears are flowing. Everybody's happy. Said, obviously, keep it close hold. Don't go anywhere with it. And 7 days came and went, and we didn't hear anything. And obviously, with everything going on at the time, the election, we were wondering if we didn't get dropped on the cutting room floor. And so we held on. And then lo and behold, December 22nd, 2020, I'm standing in line. It's about 5 p.m. We had just come off lockdown, waiting to use the phone, the official phones. Standing there waiting, and I hear my name being called by a female voice. She walked in the housing unit. And obviously in a men's prison, it's going to perk up your ears if you hear a female voice. And so I look, and I think, it's after hours on the East Coast. There's no way there's any kind of news coming right now. It's maybe some mail or something. And so my cellie comes up, says, hey, I'll hold your spot for you. Go see what's going on. And so I walk over, and she tells me, Mr. Slough, I need you to come inside and shut the door. And obviously, she's a female officer. I'm an inmate. We can't do that, ma'am. And she hands me a copy of the pardon. She says, no, I think you can. And so I shut the door, and she said, I need a phone number. You've got 10 minutes to be off this compound. You can't be here anymore. And so she calls my wife. Of course, I'm over the moon at this point and confused and wondering what's next and what happens next. And she hands me the phone, and I asked Kristen, I said, is it all four of us? Because at that time, as your clip with Nick, it was only understanding of maybe one or two.
Right.
And she said, yes, it's all four of you. You're all four coming home. And from that point, they rushed me to my cell. I had to grab what little things I had, which was legal work and books. And I saw my boss, who was out on the main walkway. Sodi was his name, great guy. Dang near 7 foot tall. He was a huge man. And I'm walking past him, and I've got my stuff, and I'm being escorted by a guard. And he said, Slough, what happened? What happened? And I said, it happened, Sodi. And I hand him the copy of the pardon, and he drops his stuff. He picks me up and hugs me. He says, oh, man, I knew you guys were getting out of here. I knew you didn't do that. So it was a really cool moment.
That's fantastic. I'm getting emotional listening to your story, my friend. We got a few minutes left. Do me a favor and just give folks a taste of the impact having to go to prison had on your life, if you're willing to share that, what kind of damage it did. And then we'll wrap it up with the main thing you want folks to take from this book. Quick, but go ahead.
You know, life is tough, and there's no guarantees. When I came out of prison, I was an extremely angry person, and I lived under the facade and kind of the shroud. Like I've had my faith strengthened. There's no question about that. But I also wore a mask that everything was okay. I'm fine, and it wasn't. It wasn't. I still hold some resentment and some anger towards what happened because it was so just egregious. Not only for us, but especially for Nick, being charged with first-degree murder and sent to die in a box by a judge who slept through the trial and slept through our sentencing. It's an absolute disgrace. What I want people to take away from this book is today it's me, tomorrow it's you or your loved one. Always ask a question. Don't ever take the media narrative as the gospel. I don't care what source it is. Look it up. Do your research. Be a critical thinker. Because casting away critical thought is how we are in this current position now, this current environment. We're taking sound bites from a dumb box telling us how to live our lives versus critically thinking through each and every component of our daily life, and especially those that are affected by our laws. And that's why it's important for people to get engaged and to walk through creating solutions on the inside. That's why I've chosen to work in government and in policy, because it's critical to have people that have walked through that meat grinder and walked through those experiences to come back with buckets of water to try and put out the fires that are going on in the house.
Absolutely. So I got about a minute left. Tell folks where they can find you. Obviously the book, but also what kind of policy are you actually working on? You're a district director for a House State Representative in the state of Texas, and we're praying for Texas and everybody there today due to the terrorist attack at the ICE facility. So tell folks where they can find you and what kind of policies you want them to know that you're working on and why.
You can find me on Facebook, find me on Instagram, on X, obviously LinkedIn. I'm working with Tommy Marquez from Tommy Marquez Consulting to work on Calvin Gibbs' case. The man was charged with 3 murders, 2 of which he was not even engaged with. And the third, he was shooting a Taliban fighter that was engaging his own troops. He's one of many that we're trying to fight for. And so we're working that with Pipe Hitters Foundation and many others. And our book obviously can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Books A Million.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you for your time. Thank you for giving us the honor of telling this story again and having you on here. We appreciate your service. We appreciate your family's service. It's been tough, but you're in our prayers. God bless you.
Thank you for having me, Colonel.
Thank you, sir. All right, tomorrow's Truth Thursday. Chad Caton's my guest of the Conservative Caucus. Said we're going to talk about Boone Cutler, our friend Boone Cutler, for a little bit, and we're going to talk about some of this crazy crap that's coming out in narratives and out of people's mouths that are on the left side of the aisle. You don't want to miss it because he's going to fire you up. I'll see you then.